everything you have.
Hello, everybody, and welcome to Celebrate Southern Africa. My name is Dawn Denton, and my guest today has just come back from Khayelitsha. So she's going to share some stories about her being in South Africa. But Deborah Morris, it is so lovely to chat to you about your book and about your writing journey. So, let's start off with, why were you in Khayelitsha?
Dawn, hi. Well, thank you very much for inviting me to come and share a few stories with you. I've literally just come back from Khayelitsha yesterday. I've been out with 250 incredible volunteers from all over the world who once a year in something called a November Building Blitz raise funds to come and then spend a week, roll up their sleeves and quite literally build classrooms, kitchens, shelters and improve schools. But not just the infrastructure, we're also very involved in a literacy program for primary school children. So all really intense, really exciting, exhilarating, uplifting, and a little bit exhausting too.
And emotional, I'm sure.
Very emotional because having been born in South Africa, the townships were never a place that, you visited when you were younger. In fact, there was a fear factor attached to being in them. So I've been working with Melon Educate since 2015. And in 2015 was my first visit to a township, Masiphumelela, near Fishhoek. And it was a real eye-opener. I've lived in India as well, so I'm aware of, the juxtaposition and poverty and wealth living side by side, but it became very real. And especially because I was also experiencing it through some of the volunteers who'd never seen anything like this before. So I felt really emotional, but a little bit probably desensitized compared to other people who've never encountered poverty like this. And then fast forward, I will have been with the charity 8 years next year. We've achieved a hell of a lot, met some very exciting people, and hopefully helped a lot of children along the way.
It sounds like you absolutely have, but you are clearly quite talented because you've put together a book that's not your story. So there was loads of other things that have come together to create this book. So you were born in South Africa, but your connection to the UK is quite strong through family. What was the connection?
The connection is that my father was born in Devon. His father was born in Grahamstown, but it's more a sort of colonial influence. On my mother's side, there was Scottish and Zambian, and she was born in Zimbabwe, and then my dad was sort of British and a bit of European, so I'm a sort of exotic cocktail, I like to think, but mostly South African. And really the book is, I have to say, it is my grandfather's story. I obviously pulled it together when he was long gone, but I knew him as a 9-year-old. He was a prolific storyteller, and he lived in Somerset West with my grandmother, and every Sunday we used to go and have Sunday lunch with them. Aww. And after Sunday lunch we'd sit on the stoop, and he always used to put me on his lap and tell me wonderful stories which he made up, and they were fabulous. And I only wish I'd captured some of them and put them into a children's book, because they had me goggle-eyed and begging for more. And of course he was very clever. He'd keep me waiting to the following Sunday to finish the story, so it would be great excitement all round. But so I knew him until he passed away at 9 years old. And then fast forward to us having a lot of stuff that belonged to him and that had been taken, and lots of papers that had just been found in a trunk. And no one had really looked very closely at these until much, much later. And then my dad was going through these folders, and there were wads of notes, all on the old sort of airmail paper. Remember that very thin paper that we used to use, and you'd put lined paper behind it so that you wrote in straight lines. And all these were his notes that he had written during his retirement of his days as a doctor. Firstly, as a medical student at St. Bartholomew's in the East End of London, and then as he went to the First World War as attached to the Royal Army Medical Corps, and then as as a country doctor in Dartmouth in Devon during very difficult sort of depression years. And then after the creation of the National Health, he decided that he'd prefer to pursue private practice, and he moved back to South Africa and set up a practice in Somerset West. So this book is really a story of a very ordinary man living in extraordinary times. And it was a real labor of love. I have to say, in the background, I was going through quite a difficult divorce. And I found that this book for me, more than anything, because I didn't think I'd get it published, it was more about maybe creating something for posterity and my kids and family being able to enjoy the stories. But I was very excited when there was such an interest in it, and I managed to get it published.
Do you think that he intended to publish it? Why do you think he wrote a lot of it down?
I think in some ways he really enjoyed recalling his life. And if nothing else, it gave him great pleasure to relive those stories and those experiences. I think he hoped that the family would take interest in it, but I don't think that he ever thought that they would be published and out in the world. I don't know. I didn't set out to get them published, but when I read them, I was so captivated of this time gone by, and when being a doctor was just such a different profession to the one it is today.
Yeah.
And you were really dedicated. I mean, my father still recalls times when my grandfather would let himself into the house early in the morning. He'd been sitting with an ailing patient through the night. Doctors in these days were seen as the pillar of the community and approached not just for medical reasons, but also just because their opinion was so highly respected. So it really was a very different time. And I don't think you could practice as a doctor during that time without getting quite close to the people that you worked with in the community. So there's this lovely I guess, flourishing of relationships. And so when I first found, we're given the papers by my dad, and he said, look, you're the one who, I was a journalist then working in television. And he said, I think you should read through these and see what you think. And from the minute I started reading them, I thought, wow, these are really interesting, and they belong. They're stories that don't just belong with me or our family, but actually I think there would be an interest in them. So because he had written them later on in life, there was no immediacy, there was no chronological order. So I had a lot of research to do to build a narrative that was going to flow and that was going to give a real feel of what his life was all about. So I started by transcribing them, and that was no mean feat, because as he got older, his writing got shaky, and there were no laptops. Yeah. He did have a typewriter, so some of them were typewritten, but it really was a labor of love. So I started to transcribe them, and then I had to attach a timeline to them. So I looked at the sort of events and the treatments that he described, and the times that he was, the sort of historic background, really, to try and create, okay, this is when there was no penicillin in the story, so this would have been pre-1928, and all this sort of thing. So putting together, I had the sort of bones, but it was sort of putting all the meat on there to create a story. And that took quite a long time. It involved visits to the National Archives at Kew, to the Royal Army Museum down at Camberley, to St Bartholomew's, to talk to curators there.
Are they all quite willing to help with a project like this? Or do you think they kind of sometimes go, oh, this is a nice little project that someone wants to do and we don't really have time for them? Or do you think they're quite keen to support you?
I think they were really keen to support me. I mean, one thing I did notice when I was doing a bit of freelance writing and writing for magazines about the book, there's been a proliferation in programs like Who Do You Think You Are?
Yeah.
Go into news agents, and so many publications now that are helping people trace their ancestry. I mean, my boyfriend bought me the DIY kit for ancestry.com, where you just sort of deposit a bit of saliva into a file and then send it off. And I was really interested to see what came back, but everybody wants to know where they come from. I think there's a burgeoning interest in all of this.
So were there any surprises when you did it?
Not really, no. I mean, very much the English, and there was some Scottish and a bit of Irish. I knew through my grandfather. So my grandfather wrote the book that his mother was a German Jew. So there was a German Jew. There was a 5% Swedish. We don't know where that comes from, but a lot of people think I look Scandinavian. So maybe, I don't know where that
Yeah,
came from.
I did mine as well.
I was happy.
Yeah, absolutely. I just wanted to be, well, I was desperate to find Jewish blood and Viking blood. Those were the two that I was keen to find.
Ooh.
I didn't find any Jewish blood. So I was a little bit disappointed, because since I was small, I always wanted to be Jewish. So I was kind of like, please let me be Jewish. But the Viking I was excited about, which is it's brilliant. And I think it's such a lovely opportunity to find out where we really come from. And I know there's been some horror stories of people discovering things that they should probably never have discovered. But do you think you got to know your grandfather a little bit better? Were you a little bit surprised at certain aspects, or did you go, oh, this is the man that I know?
I think I was just I didn't discover anything that I didn't really already know. There were no skeletons in the closet or anything like that. I think it just really made it real for me. It's one thing reading these stories, but suddenly when they were being corroborated by what I was finding in the National Archives, and and what people were telling me, it made it all the more real. And I was just so honored to feel like I was related to this man, because he came across as such a lovely human being, so dedicated, so full of empathy, so humble. And actually it was interesting, because one of the first things I did when I was thinking about putting together the book, I worked out, he writes that he delivered some 3,000 babies when he worked as a doctor in Dartmouth. And I did the maths, that I was thinking, okay, so that would mean that some of those babies, bearing in mind when he had moved to South Africa, would still be alive, all being elderly. And I rang up the Dartmouth Chronicle and I said, look, my grandfather was very well known. He was a GP, or a doctor in Dartmouth for almost 30 years. He says he delivers babies. I'd love to find people that actually knew him. So the guy I spoke to was really interested, and he said, I'm going to do a feature on this. And he did. And at the end of the feature, he put that, I said, please, will you ask them to email me if they've got any stories? And I heard from about 20 people who all remembered my grandfather, either because he had saved their life. I got one really great story of a guy whose dog had cut its paw, and my grandfather sutured this dog's paw for him. And I actually used the story. So at the beginning of each chapter, based in Dartmouth, I put the little sort of quote from each of the patients that, there's a guy, and I don't know if they're still alive, because don't forget, this book was published in 2014. In 2012, I spoke to Eric Hannaford, who said, our family held your grandfather in very high esteem. My mother often mentioned him, as my grandmother was a local midwife and she knew him very well. Here's another one by Peggy Hayes. Your grandfather was our doctor for many years, and I owe my life to him as well as that of my son. As soon as I went into labor, Dr. White Cooper could see there were complications, and he whipped me into Dartmouth Hospital, where I underwent an emergency cesarean, which was a very rare procedure in those days. He was a lovely, kind man and a real family doctor. So all these stories, I mean, they still give me goosebumps when I
I've
read
got
them
goosebumps
now.
too.
Yeah. And I'm yeah, feeling choked up. But I mean, here's one I just have to share. I remember Dr. White Cooper, but I don't think I was one of the babies he delivered. I was born at Casita Nursing Home in Paynton, as my parents lived in Stoke Fleming. My memories of a very kind man who, when I was ill, produced chocolate strawberry creams in foil wrappers. He certainly won a way to my heart. I was quite disgusted that the doctor who replaced him did not give out sweets. I often wondered what happened to your grandfather in Africa. He was well respected by my family. So, you know, again, these were all, I was actually, and I went to Dartmouth to meet them in person, and they were so enthusiastic. And so I thought, no, they deserve a mention. They deserve to be included in the book as well. So, and I sent them each a copy of the book and signed a little message inside it. So I hope they enjoyed it.
Did you feel a bit of a sense of, oh no, that's finished now when you finished the project? Did you feel a little bit empty? Because it must have been quite consuming for the period of time that you were involved with writing it and researching.
It was consuming, but it was actually a welcome relief from the divorce and all the negativity that I had in my life during that time. Because I suddenly found myself with a literary agent, and then I found that Macmillan wanted the rights to it. And it was exciting. And I was working with this incredible editor at Macmillan called Ingrid Connell. And she was really great at hand holding, because I'd never, ever done anything like this. So it was exciting, exhilarating. And yes, I will say that there was a little bit of, oh, is that it? And, you know, and it's quite something when you sort of sending off your last amendments, and then it's like out there and being taken away from you. And, you know, you're next going to see it in a book form. Quite something when the publishers send you this cardboard box with copies of the book in it for the very first time. And I remember the first thing I did was drive around to my parents, and makes me a bit emotional, but I remember my dad, because this is his father, and my dad opening the door, and I just handed him the book and said, here it is. So it was good. It was a really good feeling. There was a book launch, and that was very exciting at Daunts on the Fulham Road in London. And but I think that, funny enough, when I read the stories, I always saw them as a drama series for television. I didn't really think of them as a book, because the characters are so colorful. And also, don't forget, this was a time when we were seeing Call the Midwife, which I think is one of the reasons why Macmillan encouraged me to use the title Call the Doctor, because they said very clearly, you know, what it's about. Of course, we had, you know, Dr. Finley's case notes. They said, you know, think of James Herriot's stories as the kind of medical equivalent. So I thought, well, actually, you know, now that it's in a book, maybe the next step is to see if I can get it dramatized for television. However, I then went and got myself a job with Mellon Educate, the charity, and I haven't really had the time, also because I was moving house and getting my kids through various challenges. So I didn't really, you know, pursue it as hard as I could have done, and maybe that will happen. We'll see.
Does it feel when a publishing house takes you know, your book from now, your completed manuscript, until it's completed, do you feel a sense of you've lost a little bit of it, that they've kind of taken control of so much? Because do they have control over your cover and all of that stuff as well?
Actually, I felt it was a real collaboration. I didn't feel like they took anything away from it. I mean, the book does contain photographs, which I wanted, because I think that gives people, when they're reading stories, if they can actually see a photograph, you know, you've got an imagination on how someone looks or the place that they lived, and you can say, you know, they say, you know, you can describe it with words, but a picture just gives it a bit more clarity and a bit more authenticity as well. So I included that. But no, I would say that Ingrid at the team at Macmillan didn't really fiddle with a lot of it. They advised, and because they're experienced, of course, and I was a newcomer to this, I was very grateful for their advice, but I didn't feel that they took the story away and made anything less of it than it was. If anything, I think that they made it, any suggestions they had made it a better read. And I was very grateful for that.
That's fantastic. It must have been quite a big thing to pitch it to somebody. And did you try a few people? Did you have an agent, or how did you kind of get in with Macmillan?
Dawn, I have to say I'm a complete fraud in that sense, in that I have a very lovely girlfriend. And I've been working on the book, and I was like, I don't know how I go about finding somebody, but serendipity. So I'm talking to this friend and telling her about the book, and she said, oh, Deb, you've got to get this published. She then goes on a skiing holiday, and she happens to get onto a chairlift with a woman who is a literary agent and specializes in non-fictional books, particularly of this ilk. So my lovely friend Maeve is telling Jen Christie, who's a really amazing woman, about my book. And she said, well, I think this sounds like something that we'd be interested in. I can't promise you, but put us in touch when you get back. So that's what Maeve did. And I spoke to Jen, and I sent her, she asked me for a synopsis and then the first 2 chapters and a flavor of what all the other stories was, and said, how much of this material is there? And then she helped me kind of put it into some order, and she said, okay, we're going to go to market with it. And I actually had 3 publishers who were interested in it, but and I spoke to all of them on the phone, but I felt that Macmillan, they were a sort of bigger name, if you like, and I really got on well with Ingrid, the lady I mentioned previously, and I felt like she really understood what I wanted to do with it, and was really sympathetic in the way that she just kind of, I said, I've fallen, into this, and I want to do something with it, and I hope I can do it justice. And she was very encouraging, and I thought, actually, you sound like the person I want to work with, and that's why I went with Macmillan.
So basically the lesson is talk about it, tell people, because somebody will tell somebody who'll be the right person at the right time when you need them.
Absolutely. I'm such a firm believer in that, and also taking advantage of every opportunity. I mean, I could have said to Maeve, oh, well, it's not ready yet, and I'm not sure, and it's not ready for public consumption or for professional consumption, but I didn't. I thought, you know what, this has come to me.
Yeah.
And I'm a firm believer, when something like that presents itself, take advantage, and because it might not be the right thing, but it will lead you to wherever you're meant to be. And
absolutely. And so has that given you a taste to do something else?
It has. It has. I don't know why, I'm just lucky. There seems to be a lot of family material, but now my grandfather, his grandfather was also a doctor and looked after Queen Victoria and her family from 1859 to 1886 when he died, and I've got those royal diaries. So that is a big project and something that I want to work on. But I've got the charity. You won't believe that I'm also studying to become a counsellor. So I'm doing that, and that's 4 years, and I'm only halfway through that course. So my life is pretty busy at the moment. And I think that writing is something that you can do in there's no time limit on it. And I always think there's going to be a voracious appetite for anything to do with Queen Victoria and her family. So I don't feel like there's any time limit on it. Whereas I think with my grandfather's story, because a big chunk of the book is his time in the First World War in the trenches with the Royal Army Medical Corps. And I was aware that 2014 was the anniversary of the start of the First World War. It was very timely to bring a book like that, and every book needs some kind of a hook. So if you can find an anniversary or something to pin the story on, it makes it much easier when it comes to selling it into somebody. I think I do have more writing in me. There was also an idea I had for a novel based in South Africa with the sort of truth and reconciliation in the background. It was something that I thought of. So I don't know, I will play around, never say never, but right now my life is so busy with everything else that, sorry, it's on the back burner.
But actually, you might find an anniversary of some sort that's a Victoria anniversary that might be kind of give you a target or a goal.
It will, but I think also I have to be practical. And right now I work to keep the wolves from the door, and I study as well. And, you know, writing does take a lot of time and effort. And I really almost, with this book, I felt it was manageable. I think with my great-great-grandfather's stories, I think I need to enlist the help of a historian, because when you're looking at it, you're so worried that you're going to miss some detail or, you know, and I just feel there are people out there that, you know, if I could work in collaboration with somebody who could sort of check the historical facts and make sure that I wasn't, you know, losing anything. But we'll see, you know, it's definitely in my plans. Yeah.
And the time might present itself when you least expect it.
I hope so. You never know. I mean, I've learned along the way that, you know, there's always some surprise around the corner. We never know.
It might just be on a ski lift
Exactly.
of some sort at some point.
I am going skiing in the new year, so maybe I'll choose my chairlift partner very carefully.
Yeah, exactly. The universe puts us where we need to be at that moment, I think, and that's quite. But we've got to grab that moment, because you can just actually let it go by. Like you said, you really have to be aware of it and consider it as an opportunity, whatever it is, even at that time. So, how can people find your book? Yeah, how can people get in touch with you if there's anyone who wants to connect, because maybe they have some memory or they've got some, you know, something that they want to share with you?
Or they can help me dramatize it for television.
Yes, absolutely.
I would be delighted if anybody wanted to get in touch with me, and by all means, I presume they'll do that through you. And you have my email address, so I would be very happy if people wanted to, you know, connect with me through email. Otherwise, it so happens I have a copy of the book here, and it is available on Amazon.
Lovely.
So anybody who's interested in, you know, social history and a bygone era, and as I say, a really fascinating story and stories within a story that offer a very nostalgic look back at life in the way that it used to be, then I heartily recommend it as a read. Thank you.
No, absolutely. And I think it must make you very proud of the man that he was when you started working through those things. And I think the other way around too, the fact that he shared story with you means that would probably also be bursting with pride, knowing that you've done this and that it's managed to kind of reach so many more people.
I hope so. I think as he wasn't around, but my dad was around, and that's why I got a bit tearful. You know, my father was, you know, loved his dad, and I wanted to make him proud as well. So yeah, but I hope I've done it justice.
I'm sure you have, because I'll tell you a little secret. A friend of mine, his mother said to me, I need a list of books when you come back to South Africa that we can't always get here. And that one was on the list. So yes, so she was really quite thrilled that I was chatting to you. So
well, that's very kind. That's very kind of you to mention it. And of course, if anybody reads it and likes it, please put a little review on Amazon
absolutely.
as well. That always helps.
The best way you can help a writer is write a review. Absolutely. Oh, Deb, it's been so lovely to chat to you. And I am so thrilled that you got to share your story. And I think the message really is that we all have stories and all our families have stories. And if you know that there is a story, just get it down. And even if you don't think you're a writer, there's enough support out there. You just have to get the story down, and the rest, other people, professionals, can take control of the nitty gritty.
Absolutely. And I think that, you know, as I said, I didn't set out with getting it published, but, you know, we also think, oh God, no one's going to be interested in my story. And, you know, I think it's interesting, but they won't. Just do it, because if it doesn't get published, at least it's going to be read by your family, maybe even, you know, your friends. And it's also very cathartic when you write something like that as well. So, yeah. Go for it is what I say.
Absolutely. And we'll keep an eye on Netflix and for the future.
Oh, fingers crossed, Dawn. Thank you so much.
Okay. Thank you so much for joining us. Bye-bye.
Okay, take care. Bye. Bye.